world? Established Rich coming right back at you. And today, we got to talk about an interview that a lot of people clipped, a lot of people ran with, but not enough people actually sat with it. I'm talking about 21 Savage sitting down with Bank on Perspectives. And the reason this interview matters is not because of the headlines. It matters because 21 wasn't talking like a rapper. He was talking like a strategist. This wasn't brag talk. This wasn't posturing. This was a man explaining how he sees the board. Let's start with the part that got the most attention. Drake and Kendrick Lamar. Because 21 said something a lot of people didn't want to hear, but they could feel it deep in their gut. He said the beef was rigged from the start. Not because of music, but because of position. 21 made a point that only makes sense if you understand power. When you already number one, there's nowhere else to go. You can't be bigger than number one. You can only fall or be resented for staying there. And that's what he meant by lose-lose. If Drake lost, he lost. But if Drake won, he still lost. Because he could have been painted as the bad guy for beating the culture's favorite. That's not music talk, that's politics. 21 said he spoke to Drake after Like That drop. And he said he told him clear as day, leave it alone. Not because he thought Drake couldn't rap, but because he knew the game was set up for Drake to be the villain no matter what. This is a conversation about perception, not talent. And too many people confuse the two. 21 also pointed out something else that was important. The culture has a natural bias toward lyrical rappers. That don't make it wrong, it just makes it real. Kendrick represents depth, intention, and message. Drake represents scale, numbers, and global reach. And when those two collide, the audience doesn't judge fairly. They judge emotionally. 21 understood that from the jump. And that's why he said Drake was walking into a fight he couldn't even win, even if he won. This is why 21 was talking like a strategist. He was not picking sides. He was reading the room. And that matters to me because it shows growth. This ain't the same 21 from years ago. This is a man who has seen how narratives work. A man who understands that music is only half of the battle now. The other half is how people feel about you before they even press play. And that feeling can decide the winner before the first bar is spit. That's why 21's take hit different. He wasn't defending nobody. He was explaining the reality. A lot of people got uncomfortable with that because they don't want to admit that fairness left the chat a long time ago. Now, this is where the interview shifts and gets even more interesting because 21 don't just talk about conflict. He talks about resolution. He said he stepped in between Drake and Metro Boomin. Not to pick sides, but to cool things down. And he said Metro is starting to open up to that. That's important because it shows that 21 is positioning himself as a mediator, not a fire starter. And he believes they'll work together again. Not tomorrow, but eventually. And that tells you how he sees time. He ain't moving off emotion. He's moving off long-term thinking. This is a big shift from how hip-hop used to handle beef. Everything don't need to end and burn bridges. 21 is representing a different mindset. One that values peace without pretending disrespect didn't happen. Now listen, it's one thing to understand the board, and it's another thing to step in the middle of people who are emotionally invested. 21 Savage made it clear. He sees himself as a peacemaker now. Not a sideline commentator, but somebody who actually picks up the phone. He talked about Drake and Metro Boomin with a level of detail that I knew was not internet talk. This was real conversations happening behind closed doors. He said Drake apologized multiple times. Not once, not for show, multiple times. And that matters because apologies in hip hop are rare. Egos usually talk louder than humility. Here's where things get a little deeper. 21 says he's tried to do the same thing with Gunna and Young Thug. And he was honest enough to admit that their situation was different. Not every rift can be closed. Some situations are not about miscommunication. Some are about betrayal, perception, and consequences that can't be walked back. 21 ain't pretend he had the answers. He ain't sell us a fairy tale. He just said he tried. And sometimes trying is all you can do. This is where you see his maturity, understanding that peace is not guaranteed just because you want it. Hip-hop loves the idea of reconciliation, but it doesn't always respect the emotional damage that led to the breakup. And 21 respected that. He didn't force the narrative. He accepted that some bridges are not broken, they're burned. And burned bridges don't get rebuilt, they get memorialized. Now let's talk about the 6ix9ine moment. Because this is where the internet does what the internet does. A comment was made, a response came quick. And all of a sudden, people wanted to turn this interview into a new conflict. But this moment does not deserve the same weight.
I gotta get this fucking visa. Highness.
How you doing, sir? What are you here? So I'm seeing, according to my documents, you want to go to America.
I need to go to America. Please, I'll do anything. I can make it. Trust me, I can make it. I can be an Atlantean.
Are you not happy where you're from?
I'm not. I want to go to Atlanta. You gotta understand. I need to be from Atlanta. I need to be a gangster rapper. I can't be Central C and Skepta and these guys. They nobody.
6ix9ine responded for attention, and 21 did not feed into it. Every response is a choice, and sometimes the most powerful move is not making one. Salute to 21 on that. 21 is moving like somebody who understands consequences. He ain't interested in momentary viral moments. He's looking for stability and peace and longevity. And that takes us to the moment that really stood out to me personally, the street code conversation. This is where the interview stopped being about rap and started being about philosophy, about how people think today versus how they were taught. 21 said something that a lot of people felt even if they didn't agree. He said the police operate under a code too. They protect their own. The silence exists on both sides. Now, I understand what he was saying. He wasn't defending anybody. He was pointing out a pattern. But this is where I agree with Big Bang. The code we were taught was simple.
You don't talk to police.
Not to help them, not to confuse them, not to outsmart them. You just don't talk, period. Because the moment you start trying to define what is and isn't, you already lost. You playing a game you don't control. And what 21 really showed me is that people are thinking different now. They trying to find loopholes, explanations, and justifications. That don't mean they wrong, but it does mean the code is shifting. And when the code shifts, confusion enters because everybody starts defining loyalty their own way. What 21 said was a snapshot of how people are thinking right now. The street code conversation is what stuck with me the most. Not because it was shocking, but because it was honest. 21 said the police operate on a code, that they protect their own, stay quiet, and close ranks. And I understand what he was trying to say. He was pointing out that silence is a human instinct, not a street rule. But this is where I land with Big Bang. The code that we was taught was never that complicated. You don't talk to the police. You don't try to win a verbal chess match with the system. You simply remove yourself from the game. Because the moment you start explaining, you already gave up control. Words can be twisted. Timing can be manipulated. Intent can be rewritten. Silence was never about being tough. It was about survival. And what 21 showed in that moment is that survival thinking has changed. People are trying to reason their way out of situations that don't operate on reason. They trying to define what counts and what doesn't, what's acceptable and what isn't. But the old rule was simple for a reason. Simplicity left no room for confusion. Once the code gets edited, everybody starts making their own version. And that's when the lines get blurred. This ain't about judging 21. It's about recognizing what he represents. He represents a generation that grew up watching the old rules fail people, watching silence still lead to consequences. So they trying to think their way around it. Look at it from different angles. That don't mean they weak. It mean they adapting to a world that don't seem as clear as it used to. But adapting comes with risk because not everything needs a new interpretation. Some rules exist because they protect you even when you don't understand how. And silence was one of those rules. What this interview really did was show us the gap between how things were taught and how they being lived, between old school survival and new school logic, between experience and theory. And that gap is where most of the confusion lives at in hip hop right now. Not just in street codes, but in business, in loyalty, and in identity. 21 didn't just give us answers. He gave us transparency. He let us see how a lot of people are thinking, even if we don't agree with every conclusion. And that's why this interview mattered. Not for drama, but for direction. It showed us that hip hop is in a transitional moment where old rules are being questioned and new rules haven't been fully formed. Some of that is growth and some of that is dangerous, but all of it is real and ignoring it won't make it go away. The smart move is to study it, understand it, and decide for yourself what you're gonna stand on before a situation forces you to decide in real time. That's the lesson I took from this interview. Not that anybody is right or wrong, but just that the thinking has shifted. And when thinking shifts, consequences follow, good or bad. So if you didn't watch the interview, go check it out on the Big Facts Network. Like, comment, subscribe, establish rich. I'll be back with another one. Peace.